Today we're taking a closer look at the Chubb Detector mortise lock that I recently picked on video. As you can see here, I've got a Perspex cover on it instead of its ordinary metal cover. The difference here is the metal cover has a little ridge on the inside here that helps support the curtain, which actually helps a bit. As you can see, it's got a lot more restricted keyway than the plastic one, and that's because that actually helps to set the depth of the key insertion with this little collar on the key. And because of the thickness of this Perspex, I had to drill it right out. So as a result, I have trouble setting the depth of the key in this. Before we get into the lock, let's just have a look at the box that it came in. So that's the original box. I just think this is interesting because it is obviously a bit of history. I'm going to link a video in the description below, and I'd really recommend you watch it. Something about how the odd man picked something lock. It's by 42, and look, a really interesting history in there about the Chubb Detector and also about the Brahma lock, which if you're interested in the Brahma lock, I've got a big video on that in my videos. So look, all I can really say, Fishmark London. Going deeper into the box, we've got a note here about the monitor lever, and I'll explain what that is. That's actually the front lever closest to us. Just put that there in case you want to pause and read it. Essentially, the monitor lever is to try and tell the owner that there's a problem with the lock if the lock develops a problem due to worn keys or whatever. Got a couple of spare keys there. Some fixing screws, and that's actually a sealed packet, so I'm not going to open it. Everything in here is flat-headed screws, so predates Phillips head, obviously. I've got some screws there, and then this is a sealed pack of, I can never say this right, I'm not even going to say it. So little things that protect the keyholes. I'm not going to unwrap those because we've got some here that are unwrapped, so we can see what's going on. So that presumably would go on the interior side of the door, and this would go on the exterior side. So you get the swing away keyhole protector. So quite fancy. And obviously the lock itself is a mortise. It's designed to be sort of cut into the door. Anyway, moving right along, let's get back to the lock. I'll explain what I can about it. For a start, the reason I wanted to put this cover on, and I'm just going to turn on a bit more front lighting here to try and get you some light on. What we're looking at here is the levers themselves. That's a bit better. Right, so as you can see, they're all sort of flush with each other, and I'll just insert the key, and I just need to get the depth right. You'll note that the key is turning the curtain. You can see the bidding of the key. Let's zoom in a bit. Try and optimise our lighting. So the tops are all flat, the bottoms are all flat. Might be hard to perceive on the video, but they are. As you can see, this front lever, which isn't really a lever, has lifted because it's got the index mark there, but all of the actual levers are down. As we move, it starts lifting the levers to their various heights, and at this point it's lifted all of the levers to the right height, but it still hasn't quite engaged the bolt. Right now it's starting to engage the bolt, and as you can see, the bolt starts to move at that point. So if you're not familiar with how a lever lock works, that's a basic start to seeing it in operation, and as we go through and disassemble it, it might make a little bit more sense to you. As you can see there, the detector stump right at the back is lifted to some extent, but not enough that it catches, and if that doesn't make sense to you yet, it will once we get to disassembly. Now, one more thing I want to show you what we're in here. is how the key operates. This section of the key are purely tensions on the bolt. So it's not touching any levers. Its job is to tension the bolt. And as such, this is the tensioner I made to tension, well, all lever locks frankly, but I used it for this one. This is a piece of 4mm stainless steel tubing. I've put a heat bend in it to bend it 90 degrees. Then I've drilled through perpendicular, threaded that hole, and then just used an M3 screw. So I drilled a correct size hole, an M3 tap all the way through it. Then I can screw a screw into there, cut the head off, and file it to shape. So you can still see remnants of threading there, because essentially I just needed that shape. And you'll also note it's bent forward like that. If we look at the key, there is some warding at the back of the lock that this key needs to get around. And if we line this up roughly, you'll see that my tensioner will get past that warding, but also be sort of in the right spot at the end of the tensioner, being able to miss the next lever. So that's the idea with tensioning these locks, is that we just need to imitate this part of the key, sorry, a bit of reflection there, this part of the key with the tensioner, providing that clockwise rotation in this case. Now this first cut here is the first lever, and that is the detector lever. If we overlift that, then we effectively brick the lock. We can't do anything. This is the next lever, another one there, and there is a final lever on this side of this fork. The other side, the outside of the fork, purely rotates this curtain around. Now further to that, if we sort of imagine that curtain, I don't know if I should do this after I've showed you the curtain. This is our picking wire. What I will do is we'll put that in there and imitate picking, and you'll note that the picking wire has a bend in it. There's a very good reason for that. That's because this is a curtained lever lock. The curtain prevents me from getting direct access, and it might make a bit more sense in a moment. So you can see my pick wire in here. Can you see the end of my tensioner? We'll have to angle that up a bit. Get the key out of there. So, a bit more light. Don't know if you can see down there the stump of the tensioner. So that needs to slip around underneath all of those levers without lifting any of them, and get to a position where it's engaged in the correct place on the bolt. And you will see that once we disassemble, you'll be able to see that. So at this point I can crank on that, and I'm just creating tension. Effectively it's pushing on the bolt there. Now this might be hard to keep you I'm just going to attempt to show you what picking is about. That's really difficult at that angle. I'll do it with the wrong hands, so forgive my clumsiness. But effectively what we're doing is grabbing a lever and lifting it up. And there will be one lever binding, preventing the bolt from being able to move. And as we lift them, these are generally, so that's lever 1, that's a high lift. Lever 2, it's fairly low. Lever 3 is quite high. And if you watch the top of the detector stump, as I lift, say, lever 4, if I can get under it, no, keep hitting 3. You you can see that 4 starts to move that detector lever quite quickly, whereas 3 will not move it until it's almost at the top. And as you can see, we've now got to the point where some of the levers are sort of starting to sit up. So it is just a matter of, you lift one lever and unbind it, another one immediately binds because of amazing tolerances. And so that's why it takes that long to just sort of pick through and get all the levers to eventually get up to the point. Of course, all the time being careful not to overset. While we're here, I'm just going to actually deliberately trip the detector lever, and there you can see it's now due to this side being held up. Now we're going to remove all of our tools. Insert the key. So someone's been trying to pick my lock while I've been away from my shop. I come to work the next day, and while they've been picking it, they've tripped the detector lever. I come to work the next day, I can't open my lock because of that detector lever. The way to reset it is actually to turn the key in the opposite direction, which lifts all of the levers, and you can see pushes the bolt slightly forwards, which allows the detector lever to reset. Now at this point, I can use my key. So that's the whole point of the detector mechanism there. Right, let's zoom out a little bit. Now we're going to get into the guts of it. So I did make the screw holes and then found that I didn't have any screws that actually have the correct thread. So yeah, we've got cable ties holding our plastic cover on. There it goes. So here we have the first lever, as I said, is really just an indexing lever for the curtain. So make sure that it stays aligned with the keyhole, because if this goes spinning off, it's going to be very hard to put your key in. Nobody wants that, so I'll get that out of the way. This is our curtain. As you'll note, it sort of creates a channel, as well as blocking the keyway, obviously, when it's turned. So one of our issues is that with this tensioner tensioning the back of the bolt, that curtain's going to be in that particular orientation. There's no sort of moving it around, and that's why we need this bend in the wire, is so that I can, from within that sort of confines of that curtain, still be able to reach over underneath the levers. So if I'm picking in a clockwise direction, I need to get underneath the left-hand side of the levers. And with a straight wire, I wouldn't be able to do that. That would be about the limit of how far over I could get a wire to go, where I need it to go there. But I don't need it to go any further to the right than about there. So that's why I've got the bend in the wire for a curtain lever lock. So there's our curtain. Now this is called the monitor lever. The reason being, if the key were to be worn down and the lock was left in a semi-picked state, then we don't want to be able to remove the key, because it would be very simple then for somebody to open or close the lock at their own discretion. So the idea of this sort of barb on here is the monitor lever. It prevents the key coming out unless this lever is properly set like that. So whether the bolt's open or closed, let's try and use the key here. There we go. So that's sort of in between being open and closed. The monitor lever would be blocking the keyway. But as you can see, once the lock's open, then all the levers can drop, and therefore the monitor lever's out of the way. So there's lever 1. I'm just going to pull them all out so we can get to the back of the lock, and then we can add some levers back and show you the basics of how the locks work. But you'll note there's a cutout on these for the detector stump there. And that's really the really special thing about this particular model is the detector. Apart from having superb tolerances, but this lever here. So if this one gets overlifted, I'll show you, I'll reinstall it. And we'll actually start with the lockout. So there is the shape over here and a little sort of spring-loaded catch there. So if this gets lifted, it'll actually go too far, it'll catch there. The only way to reset it then is to pull the bolt forwards. Now, ordinarily, you can't pull the bolt, just pull the bolt forward because this wall within the lever is stopping it. So if we take this lever out for a moment, the very basics of lever locks are as such. You've got a lever that looks like this. So the critical parts are we've got a space for it here and a space for it here and a channel for the bolt to move through, or through the stump, I should say. This is called the stump. So spring pressure will make, what are we doing? Spring pressure will naturally make the lever want to sit down. What the key will do as it rotates around is move that lever up. Oh, I should also show you. This is getting a long video. I just want to be thorough with this because I feel like it could be a good explanation not only of this lock but of lever locks in general. There is the bolt in its open position. As you can see, there's a slight bit of warding there, and that's what the cutout here and also the shape of the tensioner is trying to overcome. As you can see, the warding just disappears at the top though, so that's where I could sort of feel my tensioner drop into that. In any case, as you can see, the key operates as such. Oops. So now it's locked because the bolt slid. It would go like that. That is simply the reset, which lifts this out of the way and allows the lever to drop. But this one is essentially what bears. So when I'm using my tensioner, I'm going like that and trying to pull it back like that. And in the case of my tensioner, it's not quite long enough to throw the bolt all the way, so I need to use another piece of wire to fully retract it. Putting a lever in, any old lever. The idea is the bolt would be closed. In order to retract the bolt, we need this lever to lift up so that the stump can move through the channel. Once it's done so, it will relock, so that the lock is actually locked. You get me. Anyway, with the monitor lever, as we saw, the detector lever, being a bit of a trap, wanting to an overset trap. Not only is it an overset trap and you can't touch that lever, but every other lever in front of it bears on it, so can overset it. So we'll take one that's a medium lift like this one. Because this one is a high lift, no matter how high I lift it, the stump stops and won't overset the monitor lever. However, with anything but a max lift, such as this one, if I overlift this lever and I'm not touching the monitor lever at all, I will still overset the detector lever. Monitor lever, I keep calling it. And I can't just pull the stump forward here because of the walls here. So they actually need to be lifted to the correct heights to allow a reset. Like so. What else can I tell you? I think that's about it. That was the Chubb Detector. Give you a bit of a look at all of the parts, but I hope that was enough of an explanation. It's certainly a long enough video. If you're still watching, thanks for watching. I appreciate your time and see you next time.